In this video, I'm going to share my top 4 reasons why I use braided fishing line, and then you can decide whether it's something you want to try too. I've watched a ton of videos and listened to a lot of debate about whether to or not to use braided fishing line for bass fishing. I've also spent a ton of time on the water, fishing tournaments, and tournament testing these techniques to see if they work best for me. Make sure that you stick around to the end of the video and I'll share some statistics on line diameter sizes and also share with you what I think is the most effective braid to fluoro knot. Hey, my number 1 reason for using braided fishing line is that it all but eliminates line twists. Braided line is very thin and supple and has very, very low line memory. And because of that reason, almost that reason alone, I've got it spooled up on all my spinning rods and all my bait casting rods. Hey, reason number 2, braided line is the most sensitive line out there. The general order is monofilament, fluorocarbon, and then braid in terms of sensitivity. But really, fishing is all about detecting the bite and catching the fish, and the most sensitive line is going to get that done. The third reason to use braided fishing line is that it is far stronger than mono or fluoro. Both monofilament and fluorocarbon lines can stretch 20 to 30% before they break, where a braided line is only going to stretch 3 to 5% before it breaks. And the diameter chart I teased about earlier and going to show you later will show you how the strength for a lower diameter for a braid really indicates its strength. Reason number 4 to use braided fishing line is you've got some options. Because braid is created by stranding, or by weaving strands of the filament together to make one line, there are usually several options. And I'm showing you an X4 and an X8. And what the X4 and X8 means is 4 wraps and 8 wraps. And those 2 different lines give you choices on what to use. If you think about the higher the number of wraps, the more tightly woven and the smaller the strands are, and the more round the ultimate line ends up becoming. So an 8-strand braid is going to have a tight 8-strand wrap, and it's going to be very circular. That end cross-section of that line is going to be very circular. Now an X4 line is 4 strands. They're a little larger and they're wrapped, and you can imagine their ultimate cross-section being just a little bit rougher than the 8-strand. And the 4-strand is good for fishing in weeds, pitching and flipping and cutting through weeds because it's got a rougher surface and it saws through those weeds very easily. Where the 8-strand is going to be a smoother line, smoother casting line, a further casting line. So you've got a couple of options with braid. Hey, now for that bonus content that I promised you earlier, here's a chart of the diameters of braided and fluorocarbon line. And what I want you to pay particular attention to is that the braided line is almost half the diameter of the same breaking strength of fluorocarbon line. Now, that has a lot of advantages. It has a lot of advantages running crankbaits deeper, getting presentations deeper quicker. If you're fishing in deep water, a thin braid is gonna get that thing to the bottom quicker than the more resistance in a thicker fluorocarbon line for that same given pound test. That significant diameter difference is gonna translate into a difference in performance that could help you be more effective. So I use braid on all my rods and reels. And what I do is I put a leader on that braid in most situations. The only situation in which I don't use a leader is on my frog rod or on my topwater baitcaster topwater baits. All other spinning reels and bait casting reels for applications, I use a leader. I'll use a long leader for my spinning reels, and I'll start that leader length all the way down near the first eye, even below the first eye of the rod, so that I'm tying that leader line all the way to the hook, which doubles the length of the rod in leader. And for those that are fishing in deep, clear water, you can put this, 12 to 14 foot fluorocarbon leader on, and still when you're fishing in 30 feet of water, 25 to 30 feet of water, you're still managing your fishing with that braided line and the advantages of that braided line, the quickness it gets down there. And with that 14-foot fluorocarbon leader, fish are not going to see that line. They're not going to be line shy. So I use it on all my spinning setups. And then on my bait casting setups, For instance, for a crankbait rod, a spinnerbait rod, a chatterbait rod, anything where I'm using a bait caster, I am going to use about a 2-foot leader. Here, right here, you see the crankbait right there, and I've got about a 2-foot leader there. And that leader is for a little extra shock absorption. It's there. I'm using a crankbait rod, so I'm using the right rod for the application. So I've got some backbone and some flexibility and some give in my rod. But I got a little bit of shock resistance with that leader. And then up where we fish, we've got toothy critters like northerns and muskies, and so it provides a little extra abrasion resistance should a northern suck this crankbait in and get his mouth out over the end of the crankbait onto the line. With a fluorocarbon line, you're going to get some abrasion resistance there. With straight braid, he could bite you off immediately with the braid. So I always use a short fluorocarbon leader on those action type setups like a crankbait, chatterbait, spinnerbait. The last little tip I'll leave you with is use a knot that you're comfortable with. Now, I've seen and heard and tried the FG knot. You've seen it all over the internet. It was all last winter, what kind of knot to use for braid to fluoro leader. And FG was all over the place. The pros are all tying the FG knot. You do not need to tie an FG knot. I've had them come out. I've spent a lot of time trying to perfect them. I've used super glue with them. You don't need that kind of a knot. This year I used a double uni knot, and that uni knot was very simple to tie and extraordinarily effective through an entire tournament season, tournament trails, championship. Limited amount of time, tying multiple leaders on per day. You want something simple. If you can tie the FG and you have confidence in it, go for it. But I'm telling you that you can tie a knot like the uni knot, the double uni knot, and you can get a very effective knot, quick tying, small footprint, so it gets through your guides real nice, and you can still have an effective, reliable setup that you don't need 32 wraps to get done right. Hey, I hope you found some of this information useful. And if you did, please hit that like button for me. It'll help me out. And now you can put some of these applications to practical use. And in this next video on fall bass fishing, I do just that. Now I got to get back to work to bring you more helpful and fun fishing information.